The rain had been falling since early morning, turning the sidewalks of downtown into shining sheets of silver. At the end of the busiest street stood one of the city's most beautiful restaurants, the Golden Table, a luxurious restaurant owned by 38-year-old CEO Daniel Brooks. Just a few years earlier, the restaurant had been one of the most successful places in the city. Celebrities had eaten there, business leaders had held meetings there, and wealthy families had celebrated important occasions inside its elegant dining room. But now things were very different. Empty tables filled most of the restaurant. Suppliers were demanding payment. Employees were worried about their jobs, and Daniel had spent the entire morning studying financial reports that showed another month of losses. He stood near the large glass entrance, wearing a dark suit, watching his employees work quietly. His face showed exhaustion. He had built the restaurant from nothing, and now he was watching everything he had created slowly disappear. At around noon, the restaurant doors opened and a tiny girl stepped inside. She was only 7 years old. Her clothes were clean but old, her shoes were worn, and her long brown hair was tied into 2 simple braids. She looked nervous as she stood near the entrance, holding a small cloth bag tightly against her chest. The hostess looked at her suspiciously. "Can I help you?" she asked. The little girl nodded. I need to ask someone for something." "What do you need?" the hostess asked. The girl swallowed nervously. "I need some money." A waiter standing nearby immediately frowned. "Money? This isn't a charity center." The girl lowered her eyes. "I know, I'm sorry. I just need a little." The employee sighed. "We're already struggling here. Do you know how much money this restaurant is losing? We don't have money to give away." The little girl looked toward the tables. "Please, even a small amount." The employee became irritated. "No, you need to leave." The girl didn't argue. She simply turned around and walked toward the door. What the employee didn't realize was that Daniel had heard every word. He had been standing several meters away near the office hallway, and the conversation had caught his attention. He watched the little girl walk outside alone into the rain. Something about her small shoulders and the way she kept holding that cloth bag made him uncomfortable. He looked at the employee and asked, "Why did you send her away?" The employee explained, "Sir, she was asking for money. We're already losing money every month. We can't give money to everyone who walks in." Daniel looked toward the glass door. "I didn't say you should give her money." He paused. "I asked why she was here." Without another word, Daniel walked outside. He found the little girl standing beneath the restaurant's awning, trying to protect herself from the rain. Daniel approached slowly so he wouldn't frighten her. "Hey," he said gently. The girl turned around. Her eyes widened when she realized he was the man who owned the restaurant. "I'm sorry," she said immediately. "I wasn't trying to cause trouble." Daniel shook his head. "You weren't causing trouble." He crouched down so they were at the same eye level. "Can you tell me why you need money?" The girl hesitated. She looked toward the street as if she was afraid someone might hear her. Finally, she whispered, "My mommy is sick." Daniel's expression changed. "What happened to your mother?" "She's been sick for weeks," the girl answered. "She can't work anymore. We don't have enough money for her medicine." Daniel remained silent for a moment. "Where is she?" The girl pointed toward a neighborhood several blocks away. "At home." "What's your name?" "Emma," Daniel gently asked. "Emma, how old are you?" 7. Daniel looked at her worn shoes. "And you've been coming outside alone asking people for money?" Emma nodded. "I didn't know what else to do." Daniel felt a heaviness in his chest. He had spent the entire morning worrying about millions of dollars in losses, yet this little girl was worrying about whether her mother would have medicine that night. "Emma," he said softly, "you shouldn't have to do this alone." She looked at him suspiciously. "Are you going to tell me to go away too?" Daniel shook his head. "No." He stood and opened the passenger door of his car. "Come with me." "Let's go see your mother." Emma hesitated. "Why?" "Because if she's sick, she needs help." Emma climbed into the car. A short time later, Daniel arrived at a small apartment building. Emma led him upstairs to a tiny apartment. Inside, Daniel found Sarah lying on a modest bed, pale and exhausted. She immediately tried to sit up. "Emma, where were you?" Emma rushed to her mother. "Mom, this is Mr. Daniel. He owns the restaurant." Sarah looked embarrassed. "I'm sorry. My daughter shouldn't have bothered you." Daniel shook his head. "She didn't bother me. She came because she was trying to save you." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Daniel asked about her illness, looked at the medicine bottles on the table, and realized she needed professional medical attention. He immediately arranged for her to be taken to a reputable hospital. Sarah protested, but Daniel stopped her gently. "You don't owe me anything. Let me help." That evening, Sarah was admitted to the hospital. Emma sat beside her bed holding her mother's hand while Daniel stood outside speaking with the doctor. The doctor explained that with proper treatment and rest, Sarah had a good chance of recovering. Daniel covered the initial medical expenses without hesitation. Emma ran toward him afterward. "Thank you," she whispered. Daniel smiled. "You don't have to thank me." Emma looked at him seriously. "I do." Daniel placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Then promise me something." "What?" "Never think that asking for help makes you worthless." Emma nodded. Before leaving the hospital, Daniel looked at Sarah through the glass door. He had entered that neighborhood expecting nothing, yet he had discovered a woman who had been fighting silently to survive and a little girl who had risked her pride to save her mother. For the first time in months, Daniel stopped thinking about his failing restaurant. Instead, he began wondering whether the two people he had met that day might somehow change his life as much as he had changed theirs. Over the next several weeks, Sarah slowly recovered under proper medical care. Daniel continued paying for the necessary treatment, but he never treated Sarah as someone beneath him. He visited the hospital occasionally, bringing Emma small books and making sure they had everything they needed. Once Sarah was strong enough to leave the hospital, Daniel offered her something unexpected. "I want you to work at my restaurant." Sarah looked confused. "As what?" Daniel smiled. "I don't know yet," she laughed softly. "That's not exactly a job offer." Daniel nodded. "Then let me explain. I need someone honest, intelligent, and willing to tell me when I'm making a mistake." "I think you might be that person." Sarah hesitated. "I've never worked in a luxury restaurant." Daniel answered, "Neither had I when I started my first business." Sarah accepted the job. At first, she worked at the front desk and helped organize customer reservations. She quickly noticed problems that Daniel had become too busy to see. Customers complained about slow service. The menu was too expensive for local families. Some dishes were beautiful but took too long to prepare. The restaurant was spending too much money on ingredients that were frequently wasted. Sarah began writing down every problem she noticed. One evening, she walked into Daniel's office carrying several pages. "I think your restaurant doesn't have a money problem." Daniel looked surprised. "We're losing money every month." Sarah nodded. "Exactly. But you're trying to solve the wrong problem." Daniel leaned back. "Explain." Sarah spread her notes across his desk. "Your restaurant is trying to be everything at once. Luxury dining, family dining, business meetings, private events. But customers don't know what makes this place special anymore." Daniel studied the pages. "What would you do?" Sarah replied, "Make the restaurant feel valuable without making ordinary people feel unwelcome." Daniel listened. Sarah suggested a new lunch menu with affordable signature dishes, a smaller evening menu using ingredients efficiently, family dinners on weekends, and a system that allowed customers to reserve tables through a simple online platform. She also noticed that the restaurant's most talented chefs were being ignored because management only focused on expensive dishes. She suggested promoting the chef's most popular recipes instead. Daniel initially hesitated, but he gave her permission to test the ideas. The results surprised everyone. Within the first month, lunch reservations increased dramatically. Food waste dropped. Customer reviews improved. Families began returning on weekends. The restaurant's atmosphere changed from cold and overly formal to warm and welcoming. Daniel realized that Sarah wasn't simply a good employee. She understood people. She understood what customers wanted because she had once been one of the people who couldn't afford restaurants. Like the Golden Table, one evening, Daniel stood near the entrance, watching the restaurant. Completely full for the first time in almost a year, customers laughed at tables. Children ate with their families. The chefs were working confidently. Employees who had once feared losing their jobs were smiling again. Daniel looked at Sarah, who was checking reservations at the front desk. "You did this," he said. Sarah shook her head. "We did it." Daniel smiled. "No, you saw what I couldn't." Emma, now spending some afternoons at the restaurant after school, ran toward them carrying a drawing. "Mom, Mr. Daniel." Sarah smiled. "What did you draw?" Emma held up a picture of the restaurant. It showed 3 people standing together in front of a giant building. "This is our restaurant," she said proudly. Daniel looked at the drawing. "Our restaurant?" Emma nodded. "Yes, because you helped Mommy and Mommy made it better." Daniel's eyes softened. The little girl who had once stood outside asking for money had unknowingly become part of the reason the restaurant survived. As the months passed, the Golden Table became more successful than it had ever been. Daniel expanded carefully, opening another location using the same principles Sarah had developed. He promoted Sarah to operations director and gave her a real share in the business. She never expected it, but Daniel insisted. "You didn't just work for me," he told her. "You saved something I had almost given up on." Their relationship also changed naturally. Daniel admired Sarah's intelligence, kindness, courage, and dedication to her daughter. Sarah admired Daniel because he had helped her without demanding anything in return. Their feelings grew slowly through respect, trust, and countless ordinary moments rather than sudden promises. One evening, after the restaurant closed, Daniel found Sarah sitting outside with Emma. The city lights reflected across the windows. Daniel sat beside them. "Sarah," he said quietly, "when Emma first came into my restaurant, I thought she was asking me for money." Sarah looked at him, but she was really asking for a chance. He smiled. "And she gave me one too." Sarah's eyes became emotional. "Daniel, you've changed our lives." He shook his head. "You changed mine." Emma looked between them and smiled. "Does that mean we're a family now?" Both adults laughed softly. Daniel looked at Sarah, and after a long pause he asked, "Would you want to build a life together?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She looked at Emma, then at Daniel. Finally she smiled. "Yes." Months later, Daniel and Sarah married in a small, beautiful ceremony surrounded by close friends and the employees of the Golden Table. Emma stood proudly between them, holding both their hands, and the restaurant that had once been drowning in debt became one of the city's most successful and respected businesses, not because of money alone, but because its new foundation was built on kindness, honesty, opportunity, and the belief that sometimes the person asking for help is actually the person who will one day help you rise.